Yeah, Joanne is planning on you updating it yourself.
Oh, she's doing it right now?
No, she was planning on you updating your agenda.
Oh, just do it on the fly? Okay,
Yes.
good, not a problem. All right. Then let's call the meeting to order of the Pandemic Response and Economic Recovery Committee at 1:04 on August 10th. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you.
I have no sound.
Commissioner Woodward,
Here.
Gershenson,
Here.
Biz,
Here.
Zach,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Lubes,
Here.
Miller, Nelson,
Here.
Taub,
Here.
Weibert, looks like he's on the phone.
For access code,
Weibert,
followed by the pound or hash sign.
Kuhn,
I am here, but I want to tell Mr. Chair I am going to have to leave early because I have a conflict. Thank you.
To enable audio controls, please enter your audio PIN followed by the pound.
Understood. Thank you,
Mr. Chair, you have a
Commissioner.
quorum.
Do not have a PIN.
Okay. We have
Pound or hash. Muted.
all right, if you're not talking, can you please go on mute? Can you hear, Phil? I'm hearing your speakerphone.
I'm now on.
You're out. No, we can hear you. Okay. Yep. Perfect. All right. There we go. And it looks like Commissioner Miller has arrived. All right. Let's rise and behind Commissioner Weibert for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. We've got 3 batches of minutes. We have the minutes from June 29th, July 13th, and July 20th. Can I get a motion to move approval? Moved by Commissioner Gershenson, seconded by Commissioner Lubes. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Let the record reflect that the minutes are approved unanimously. That brings us to approval of the agenda. We need to add 2 items, 2 discussion items for items 3 and 4 under the regular agenda. The first one, number 3, will speak to reopen school plans. I know a number of commissioners have been getting calls, so we can get a preliminary update. We'll be getting more information. And the executive office sent out some communications right forward around to the entire board earlier, but we can have some opportunity to ask updates on that front, as well as an update on the August primary election, specifically things that Oakland County did. That'll be item 4. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda, adding items 3 and items 4, moved by Commissioner Gershenson, seconded by Commissioner Nelson. Any discussion? Commissioner Spiz.
Yes, Commissioner Woodward. How about, could we add a number 5 and talk about the resolution I put in at the board meeting last week?
No.
I have to ask.
All right. All right. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Let the record reflect that the agenda has been approved unanimously, and that will bring us to public comment. And see if Andrea or anybody else, is there anyone on the line for public comment to address the Pandemic and Response and Economic Recovery Committee?
Yes, I currently have 2 callers and 1 online submissions. I can open it up to callers. Caller 1, would you like to speak for 3 minutes?
Hello, am I caller 1?
You're caller 2, but you're welcome to go first.
All right, sure. Is this regarding anything in particular that I should be addressing, or I have a comment regarding the Troy School Board's actions on the return to school plan?
Please speak freely for minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my comment. it has come to my attention that the Troy School District, in trying to develop its return to schools roadmap plan that the governor has required them to do, is having problems dealing with the Oakland County Health Department. It appears as though the Troy School District is going to close the schools this fall if they do not receive adequate information and guidelines from the Oakland County Health Department. And I will quote the superintendent in the meeting that he had on August 5th, stating that he and his staff, quote, have yet to receive direct guidance from the Oakland County Health Department. There are significant components within the governor's return to school roadmap that require input from the local health department, and quite frankly, ours has simply let us down at this point. Now, I'm sure this probably gets into legal matters. The sticking point seems to be over the question of whether their wording corroborate versus cooperate should be in operation here. But I would certainly appreciate it if anyone on the Board of Commissioners could look into the matter and direct, if possible, the Oakland County Health Department to do whatever it can to provide information to the Troy School District so that it could be able to open schools this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, could you give your name?
Resident of Troy. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. My name is Andrew Murphy, and I am a resident of Troy.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Murphy, we don't generally engage in public comment back and forth. This is one of the topics we're going to be discussing in the committee this afternoon, so feel free to stay and watch and listen to the updates and the things that have actually been going on.
Great.
I'll move forward together. So that's already on the agenda for today's topics. Andrew, anybody else for public comment?
Thank you, Andrew. Caller 1, would you like to speak?
That caller 1 may be me, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yep. No, I know you. Mr. Wiper had some volume issues or sound issues, and so it might be Commissioner Wiper.
Okay, thank you. Then I have one online submission that I'll read.
Thank you, Andrew.
Carol Frankelstein. She is reaching out as a trustee for the West Bloomfield School District and president of the Oakland County School Boards Association. She'd like to share some serious shortcomings in the Oakland County COVID-19 Public Health Toolkit for K-12 schools. Some Oakland County districts have used Kent County's plan because of Oakland County's toolkit was either unavailable or much needed tools were missing from the toolkit. Keep in mind that this toolkit is supposed to guide school personnel, not medical or public health professionals. Boards of education will be held responsible for keeping students and staff safe. Many boards now plan to remain in remote learning because we're all ill-equipped to make public health informed decisions. Phase 4 is a very gray area. How many cases per 100,000 people per day? How many days should school boards use to determine whether to close schools and shift to remote learning? What trends would indicate that is all safe for schools to be open? Schools need specific, separate scenarios for a positive test with no symptoms versus test with symptoms, someone with symptoms but a negative test, and someone with symptoms and no test. Even if the first two scenarios are treated the same, this has to be spelled out. Under what circumstances are the guidelines same for all staff and students when they differ? Wisconsin spelled out some differences for staff and students. Other specific concerns on page 6 are with prevention. The toolkit refers to physical barriers such as plexiglass, yet very few school staff work at a reception desk or similar areas. There are situations when teachers and paraprofessionals should be wearing eye protection and face shields with their mask. What about student education classes? Is this surprising that the toolkit does not strongly recommend restricting unnecessary visitors to school buildings? Page 11, responding to illness. The toolkit states the students who become ill with symptoms of COVID are to be placed on identified quarantine areas with surgical masks in place. If the person was wearing a cloth face mask covering, does this mean that they must change to a disposable medical grade mask? Special needs of students would also refer to anyone that has doctor's note and not able to wear a mask. There are big differences for school personnel. Be specific. Scenarios. The scenarios provided do not address notification of classmates, let alone a time frame to do so. Schools immediately notify for head lice or measles, but not for COVID. In what scenario do we move to an entire classroom to remote learning? What do we do in case of a symptomatic person with false negative test? There is no guidance on notifying those in the classroom of recommendations of retesting or continued quarantine. Household members of students shouldn't refer to students and staff. Page 18, there's test resources for youth testing locations to be determined. Seriously, it's irresponsible to provide this document, let alone open schools, without providing lists of available test sites for schools and children throughout Oakland County. Schools need your help to continually remain safe. Thank you, Carol. And I will submit that for public record so you can have it for later use.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. And is there anybody else on the public comment line that since we started? Nope.
There's no other new colors and no other online submission.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you for the people who submitted public comment. Seeing no more further comment, I will declare public comment closed, and that will bring us on to communications. First item, we have an Economic Development Community Affairs 2020 EDA CARES Act Recovery Assistance Grant Program application. Can I get a motion to receive and file? Moved by Commissioner Zach, seconded by Commissioner Miller. Any discussion? Commissioner Taub.
I don't know which grant this is because we've had so very many, but is this the grant that senior centers and could apply for?
EDA. Okay, let me see my
I
packet
don't
here.
know.
Well, hold on a second. I think I do know what it is. I just got to like pull something else up here. I have the agenda up on my page here. Hold on a second. Okay, this is a grant application that was sent in the amount of $5 million to the United States Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration, EDA. So this is, it would require a $1.5 million community grant, and this would create a large grant, a re-granting fund in partnership with our, I believe, with the administrator of our micro grant program, SEED, that we work with. So this is like a notification of the grant application that was submitted, and we're pending hearing back whether or not we would be awarded the grant, the $5 million grant from the Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And when we do, and when we get that, then we will formally take action to receive the grant.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Wyford. Commissioner Wyford? There. Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you. Can you unmute Commissioner Wyford? Try unmuting and
Yes,
talk.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm coordinating between the phone and computer, but the interesting thing about this grant, if everybody will recall, the normal CARES grants have all ended on December 30th of this year. This is that one grant that is going all the way into 2022, I believe. So, and we're doing a match to it. So this grant will be available for another year and a half. That was a good thing about this grant.
Right, correct. Thank you, Commissioner Wyford. And this is just the communication of the application was sent. Due to the timeliness, I authorized administration to send that grant. And then when we receive it, the board will formally receive it, knock on wood, that we get the $5 million and can help create a revolving fund for our local businesses. Okay, seeing no further discussion on communications, all in favor of receiving communications, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And let the record reflect that the communications were received unanimously. And that will bring us to our regular agenda. Like I said, we have got 4 items. In our packet, we have items 1 and 2 that deal with specific resolutions, and items 3 and 4 will deal with school reopen plans and Oakland County's assistance to support that. And then item 4 will be a quick update on the success of our administration of elections in Oakland County during the primary. So it brings us to item 1. Do we have a motion? Moved by Commissioner Taub. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Lubes. This is miscellaneous resolution 20197, Board of Commissioners facilitation of a plan to provide broadband internet access to school children in Oakland County impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So this was a Commissioner Taub, do you want to speak to it first? And then I think we've got some people on the line that can provide some context of things that are going on, and then we can have a conversation of where we want to go from here. But, so Commissioner Taub, do you want to start us off?
Yes, first off, I want to say that I know that Commissioner Michael Spiz, signed on to this, as did other Republicans, but their names have been taken off. So if you would be so kind as to ask people if they would like to sign on to this, I'd appreciate it. I don't know if we have enough time to do this now. This was introduced in June, and the whole summer has flown by, as we know. My concern has been and will always be getting learning to children. As a former teacher, I think that however we have to teach them, we have to teach them. And in this pandemic, sadly, we don't have much of a choice. So with that in mind, I know that we did have a study done by our previous county executive, Brooks Patterson, about doing wideband throughout the county. Sadly, we were hit with a very difficult situation in 09, 10, 11, 12. Those of us who are here recall it very well, when we had a bubble bursting and economically things were very difficult, and we had to pull things up by our bootstraps and hunker down. And we're kind of in that place now, except that the federal government has stepped in with some funding. So I don't know if we can revive. There was a plan, previous plan. Nobody's had an opportunity because it hasn't passed our board to look into this. But I think it's imperative that we get broadband throughout this county. I do know that there are commissioners who live on the fringes of the county, not the fringes, I'm sorry, Mike Spiz, but wherever you live in Hooterville, they struggle. They struggle with reception, with other things. And I don't know if Phil does too at his end, but he's on a county border as well. But I think it's imperative that we start looking into this because, good Lord, we don't know how long this thing's going to last. We could have a vaccine and Rudy Hobbs would send it out right away to all of us into the health department. Or we could have nothing for a couple of years, in which cases our kids may be at home, sadly, for a longer period of time. And also the other part is the economic part. Obviously, there are people in this county who have trouble with broadband and don't have it or are struggling with it, and they're trying to work from home. So there is an economic component as well. So I'll leave that with you, and let's see where we can go from there.
So we can see where we go. So so the conversation around broadband access, which is as much a national and a statewide conversation, even in areas of Oakland County, as Commissioner Taub talks about, we've got an infrastructure component. We have a student access for remote learning during this pandemic. We have access to vulnerable populations, like all of these types of things. So it's all encompassing. And I think for the purpose of this conversation, as we move forward, we probably should be zeroing in what the priority is. And I just think that we have some public comment conversations, the remote learning aspect. We've got to prioritize what this looks like, and then what are the short-term and long-term solutions to addressing it. So let's begin the conversation. I know that we've got Deputy Executive Rudy Hobbs that's on, as well as Mr. Yoakum and Mike Tim from IT. I see Mike just came up board, and Deputy Superintendent Mike Yoakum from Oakland Schools is also on, can provide some context, at least from the school piece of it. I know a lot of the resolutions spoke to school things. I think the goal is if we can have a concerted conversation what are appropriate next steps resolution can be supportive of to advance this to make certain that students are having access. The other thing I will underline that in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of school districts go to an all virtual platform, which adds a whole different level of complexity to this conversation. We need to make certain that kids have access to internet and platforms and technologies to be able to participate in schools. Because I think all of us would agree that we want to make sure that our students succeed during this unpredictable time that we find ourselves in. So without any further ado, Mr. Hobbs and Mr. Tim, I'll hand it over to you, and then we'll invite Mr. Yoakum in to talk about what Oakland Schools has been doing and where is the synergy points that we can be working collaboratively together.
I'll start off and then I'll hand it over to Mike. And Mike and I have had a conversation about this probably about a month ago at this point. I think that it's definitely something that we want to take a look at. I've had conversations with Commissioner Woodward and Chris Ward about this issue. I think that the next appropriate step, is for, a group from the Board of Commissioners, the Executive Office, our IT department, to really get together and really understand, where the opportunities are to really kind of move the ball forward around this broadband and the small disconnect that we have in the county. I think I was surprised when I sat down with Mike and his team to really learn, kind of where Oakland County is in our plans to really kind of close that gap completely. I think that the IT team, has a really good understanding about what needs to happen as it relates to next steps. But I'll be very honest with you. We're going to need partners. And those partners are going to look like, AT&T, that partner is going to be Verizon, it's going to be Comcast. And so it's going to be, for us to really kind of make the headway that we want to make in this space. I think as a county, Board of Commissioners, Executive Office, need to be aligned in terms of what our ask and requirements are going to be of the carriers. And so with that in mind, I think that we should understand that it's going to be us, but it's going to be us really leveraging our relationships with those partners to really kind of close this gap. Mike, you want to add on a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Rudy. Thank you, commissioners. As Rudy mentioned, when this resolution was first introduced, we did take a look at some of the previous plans and previous study that had been done. Obviously, there have been significant changes in technology in that time frame. And there are a lot of options available to us. One of the things that we did discover, and this is true across the country from the data that we have been reviewing, there is some discrepancy between what the Federal Communication Commission, the FCC, understands and reports related to high-speed internet access across the country. There's some discrepancy between their reports and obviously what individuals are actually able to achieve or use. The FCC actually has Oakland County at over 99% coverage. Now, there's a little bit of a nuance in that piece of data, and that means there are providers, as Rudy mentioned, and those providers have the capability to deliver to every resident in the county. That does not mean that every resident in the county, especially that last 1,000 feet, the very end of the run, if you will, up to the house. So there are places in the county where Comcast or AT&T, Verizon, they provide service, and there's others as well. They provide service, but the group of 30 homes in a neighborhood may not be connected to that last big run. And sometimes those last 1,000 feet can run, $5,000, $10,000, even $15,000. And that becomes the responsibility of the homeowner in those instances, at least according to the way contracts are set up today. So we have had some conversations, as Rudy mentioned. This is something we want to work with some of these partners, because at the end of the day, they are the providers with the infrastructure that we need to work with to solve this. And that's just on the coverage side. The other part, we have had conversations with the ISD, with some of their technology folks. And I will let the superintendent speak. But one of the challenges we also have beyond just the infrastructure is we also need to think about as a board, as a county, our place in helping residents and school children in this particular case, those that have difficulty affording it, because just because the coverage is available, there is still a monthly charge. So the issue of whether or not a household can afford the monthly charges is another thing that will have to be tackled. And that's not a technology issue per se, that's a policy and funding issue. And then finally, the good news is there is, as Commissioner Woodward mentioned, a lot of conversation nationwide going on about this. So, you know, a lot of the congressional representatives are talking about this and working through funding. A lot of the states are working through this. But it's a millions, tens of millions, you know, across the country, it's billions of dollars in technology infrastructure that's going to solve this problem long term. One of the good news pieces, though, is we have multiple options now. We don't just have to use a cable. We don't just have to use, you know, a cellular device. You know, even a few years from now, we'll have access to networks of high-speed satellites. Google just got, or Amazon just got FCC approval to do high-speed internet via satellite, a network of satellites. And many of you may have heard Elon Musk is building that network today as well, his network independently. That's not a short-term solution, but the good news is there are lots and lots of technology solutions that are out there that are coming. But again, there's many fronts we have to work on this. So in IT, we are very much in tune with this and very involved already, and looking forward to continuing to push forward.
Thank you, Mr. Tim. And then before we take questions of Rudy or Mr. Tim at this moment, I'd like to invite Mr. Yoakum into the conversation, because I know a lot of this conversation is centering around students and their student need and student access and student learning and student remoteness and full wire remote instruction in the fall and maybe beyond. Mr. Yoakum, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule. I know you are incredibly busy right now to join us to provide some insight on what Oakland Schools is doing in preparation, and maybe even identifying maybe where some help, support, where Oakland County and the board can be helpful in addressing this challenge.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodward, and thank you for inviting me here today. As we move towards the opening of school for the 2021 school year, we're seeing districts make the decision to go back online again for reasons of health and safety, and all of our districts, regardless, are going to be offering an online option. And we learned many things when schools closed in the spring. One of the things that became so apparent was having equal access to those tools that a student needed to be successful in a virtual learning environment. And that we had some ways to go to make sure that we gave all students that access, whether it was because of their geography, where they happen to be located, or whether it was because of their inability, the lack of resources that the family had to provide that connectivity. So it's a very serious issue, and it's one that we're trying to find answers to. I'm gonna turn it over at this time to Tammy Evans, who's joining me here today. She's our Assistant Superintendent for Shared Services and our Chief Information Officer. And she's really been working pretty exhaustively on this since the closure of schools in the spring. So Tammy?
Welcome, Tammy. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. We really appreciate your attention to this matter. It is definitely a crisis in our world. I'd like to support all of the comments made by Mr. Tim. We have found many of the same disadvantages, if you will, in some certain areas, but it is not always about a physical connection. We being the Michigan education technology leaders across the state have been doing a lot of evaluation on what kind of funds we can use across all of these issues. We've talked to philanthropists, we've talked to our state legislators and gotten some support from them through the Senate Bill 690. We appreciate your resolution and the attention to Oakland County specifically. We are also working very closely with your IT department to evaluate and assess exactly where those community deficiencies are for connection. We have worked with all of our local districts to do surveys of every educator and every student, so we know pretty much by the address almost where we need to give them the most support. So in connection with everything you're doing and opportunities to bring the correct funds, you're right. The dollars for building out, the dollars expanding at the end of December are very difficult for us to do any kind of build outs. But there are lots of opportunities for the ways in which we could help students. Our districts have been allocating tens of thousands of devices to these students to take home and have at home. We have been supplying things like hotspots and extending our Wi-Fi's in each of our school buildings and our libraries. We've talked about other ways of supplying broadband in a short-term need. As you know, the broadband bandwidth is very important, and we see a lot of challenge in that area as well. The numbers we're using in Oakland County are around 30 to 33% of our students and our educators who still need to be connected in a permanent way.
So on that, Tam, let's start opening up to questions. But first, so you said 30 to 33%, that's students and educators, or students or educators?
Yeah, it's a combination. Yeah, it's not as, yep, the number's not high in educators.
Right. And one question that I know I've gotten, so I mean, roughly 200,000 students in our county public school system. I mean, that number's probably a lot larger than people realize. That don't have a permanent solution, and that could be anything from the equipment to the technology, the internet access. I mean, I guess you could say to the tech support to be able to use that efficiently, to be able to support their stuff. So, thank you very much. Do you have a breakdown by school district of how many students per district? Because I know that commissioners would be very interested if there's any demographic information that is gathered and can be shared to get a more accurate picture.
Yeah, we're almost done collecting all of that, and we were sharing it with Mr. Tim's department this week, at the end of the week. So we're happy to share that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, let me open it up to questions of commissioners. Commissioner Taub first.
Thank you. You know, I know we aren't the Upper Peninsula, but they had a very unique plan up there, because obviously there are kids who, you know, there's nothing but trees around their homes. So what they did is they equipped a school bus or a van with everything that was needed. And I'm not technical, Mike Tim, so you would get this. I'm sorry. They equipped a school vehicle of some sort of van with all the equipment that was needed, so that Johnny, when mom and dad would drive that child to the parking lot where this van was, the child would get his or her instructions, go to school there, log in, get all the instructions, blah, 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 in the car, and then go home and do the work. Now, I don't know if this is feasible in our area, but certainly it's a way to kind of get started, especially if we have areas where there are some, you know, areas where there's just absolutely nothing for people. That's one thing. The other thing is, Commissioner Woodward mentioned school districts. Well, you're going to be shocked when I tell you that the area I represent, and I've spoken to both school district people on both boards, Birmingham and Bloomfield, there are children who do not have Wi-Fi or internet, or, I mean, even iPhones, okay? Or if they have iPhones, that's about all they have. And we all know how awful iPhones are to do school homework on. they're almost impossible. So I'm just saying, or there are children who don't have families who are cutting out a lot of stuff in the pandemic just to keep the roof over their heads and the children fed. So that's another problem we're facing, okay? And then, of course, there are children who are homeless, who are living in hotels or motels or whatever. So we have a lot of those problems to conquer, and we just have hours practically or days to do it in, because as we know, school is starting. So I was suggesting this van, Mike Dim, or vans, as a kind of solution, temporary solution until we can figure out what else to do. Because if we're going to start looking at Comcast and AT&T and Verizon and all those other guys, that's going to take forever. We're talking about 6 months to a year and chatting with them. We all know how that works. They don't do things overnight in those big corporations. It takes forever and ever and ever. So we need really now what I call a short-term solution. And I thought the people in the Upper Peninsula were brilliant doing that. That's what I have to say. The other thing I wanted to say is, not only is this for school children, but our social services, our mental health departments, our substance use, everything is being done online except for meetings of 12-step meetings. Those are being done very carefully in person. So, you know, we're struggling with a whole lot of other things as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Taub. Mr. Tim, do you want to respond to I think what Commissioner Taub's talking about is these mobile hotspots that to create access points in neighborhoods where there's a high density of people who don't have a connection and using wireless technology to do that. Mr. Tim, you want to elaborate on that and the feasibility of such things?
Yeah, only to say that that's a very good point. It is something that we had heard about, and we are also exploring that in addition to the longer term, because Commissioner Taub is absolutely right. Working with the providers is going to be at least more of a medium term. It's not going to be solved in the next month. So we are working with the school districts on that as well. And there's, again, lots of pieces of it. You know, as the superintendent mentioned, they have to have the equipment as well, and they have to be able to, you know, access the hotspot with the equipment, and they've got to be connected into the, you know, into the school district or into that school. So there are a lot of pieces of it, but certainly that hotspot's also a very good short-term solution.
Commissioner Taub, I see your hand. Is it to respond to that?
Yeah. Also, the other thing is bandwidth as well, because if you don't expand it you know, with 3 or 4 people in a home, and dad's working from home, mom's working from home, you got a couple of kids in there trying to do their homework or talking to their teachers or tutors or whatever, you have a lot of problems. That also is a way perhaps we can figure out how to expand it in individual homes, because I know even in my house, when both of us are online, holy cow, and we've expanded ours twice. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Well, Commissioner Taub, don't forget to compete with Animal Jam, Minecraft, and every other online video game there is out there. We are sharing a lot of bandwidth, which is why we got extra. But you bring a good point here. I want to make sure that there's other commissioners on the committee. If there's any questions for any of the people who spoke or conversations for each other, Commissioner Janet Jackson. Oh, get it.
Thank you. I couldn't get my mute to go off. So it looks as though from the discussion that this is a two-pronged problem, basically geography and affordability. As far as attacking both of those in different ways, I think the affordability issue has been addressed before with Comcast and AT&T and those large corporations offering discounted or free internet service for those children that meet the free lunch requirement. I don't know as far as, you know, what we're going into now with the pandemic, you know, how we're gauging free lunch access and things like that, because that's another part of the system kind of that has fallen out. Could you let us know if you're looking at it that way, if you have like a team maybe that's looking at it differently through social services versus it just being a geography and a infrastructure problem?
I'll take that one. Yes, we are. So we have had conversations in terms of how to support schools. So when we talk about supporting schools, whether that, when we start the conversation, we talk about, like PPE and how we support schools that way. A big piece of that conversation is hardware and accessibility, as it relates to, the internet. So, we want to make sure that kids, who need it, actually have the hardware, because that's the other piece, right? Do you actually have a Chromebook that you can log on to, the web, and do your online work? So we have given thought about that, and we're still kind of thinking through how we support that. I think that this week we'll know a lot about what schools plan to do. About some of the schools are, reevaluating decisions. Some schools are making decisions, as it relates to online. And I think that, like we've been generous in the past, right? In terms of who we help. We did the $2 million for the nurses. And send 68 nurses, or training 68 nurses to go into our school systems and be helpful. And we're also thinking through how do we provide hardware and accessibility, for those kids who need it.
Okay, so that's good to know that we are looking at it and attacking it down those two different lanes, because the infrastructure and the geography, maybe for the outlying communities, it may be a larger task than maybe helping with the affordability of the service right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. I see Commissioner Todd, we got our hand up again. Let me see if there's anybody else that has to speak for the first time. Seeing none, I got a couple of comments. I'll let Commissioner Todd go again for a second.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Commissioner Jackson that I do know in many school districts, they were scrambling to get physical, iPads or whatever into the kids' hands. And I think most of them were reasonably successful. The problem is when you have 2 or 3 kids in a household with one iPad, it doesn't work. I mean, each child needs his or her own device. If you have one computer and mom's using it to go to work, so those are the problems, not only of accessibility of wideband or any kind of whatever, it's also, you're right, also about how many do we need in a household? And when are the kids going to go to school? Because if they're all starting at 9 o'clock, and mom's got to be, and dad have to be at work at 9, working at home at 9 o'clock. Now you've got 5 devices going, 4 or 5 at the same time in various portions of the home. So that presents a problem. It really is, it's staggering to me anyhow. So I think we do need both, even though the school districts have told me they scrambled and scrambled and scrambled to get physical devices into homes, and I'm sure they did. We're still struggling. They're still struggling, the kids, in sharing. And I want to do my homework now, and whatever. So hopefully we'll be able to help with that as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Taub. So based on the conversation, and just to kind of recap kind of where we are, I think that we acknowledge the infrastructure barriers, which include some geography issues, but also affordability barriers, hardware, internet access issues, provider needs that have to be addressed. And we know that our IT executive office, Oakland Schools, is already working at this, and something that I think that the executive Hobbs said that I think is important. And I'd like to see, like, as it relates to this resolution, which said call for development of a plan. Well, it seems like conversations and figuring out what to do, some assessments, some exchange of information that has been happening and it's continued to happen. But I would maybe ask the sponsor, Commissioner Taub, would be open to maybe the kind of tweaking, changing this resolution a little bit to be maybe more of a study group, because the resolution spoke specifically to students, even though I think Commissioner Taub, brought up maybe this is a broader issue beyond just students. It's also impact vulnerable populations and impacts areas around the county that are beyond students. But to work with staff to see and the executive office to maybe tweak this resolution to be more about forming whatever this work group is with commissioner participation, our IT, the executive office, Oakland schools. We have the short-term issue dealing with COVID and student readiness. We have the likelihood of an increasing number of students going all virtual through the fall. But the reality of this is a long-term issue. Like I often say with COVID didn't create these problems, but put a big giant spotlight on inequity that exists in our communities, disparities that exist in our communities. And so even without COVID, this is a conversation that probably needed to happen. And this creates the impetus to be able to do that. I just think the resolution as it's written calls on the development of for a plan and puts a time frame. Seems like the conversation has been happening. It seems like we need a more proactive, long-term collaborative process of us all working together going forward, and ask the sponsor to consider maybe holding on this and then working on trying to rework it to accomplish creating that work group going forward.
Yeah, that would be fine. I have not written any language. I don't know if somebody else has written language. That would be perfectly fine with me, because today is a rather sad day for me. Michigan football won't continue in the fall. So, you know, I have to do something in the fall besides play football. Okay.
We'll make you a technology guru. Okay. Well, how about this?
Sure.
Can we, why don't we move to postpone taking action on this right now, work with staff to figure out how to do something. And if we can work something, I mean, we can get language worked out, we can just walk it on to the board floor if it's something, I mean, if we can get it done in the next short while.
Yeah, well, we're not meeting till the 20th, am I correct?
Right. So that, I mean, we can probably even convene before then, if necessary.
Yeah, that would be fine. That would be fine. I also want to add one other thing. For some strange reason, some names were left off this resolution.
Well, they're at the bottom.
Where?
Oh, I don't know why. Was there at the top
No.
and the bottom? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, we'll get.
Eileen Kowal and Mike Spiz and possibly Phil. I don't know if you signed on to this, but they were left off.
Okay. All right. So we'll work with staff to figure out where all that is. But
Okay.
whether it's a redraft of a resolution, a new draft resolution, we can address all of that. So if
Okay.
it's okay with you, I mean, Commissioner Todd, why don't we postpone taking action on this?
Okay, but
Next
I would
meeting or
like,
sometime soon.
if I may, I would like Mike, Tim, and Rudy, and Mr. Yocum, and Ms. Evans to be thinking about this, because this is what we're going to want to be doing, and see how we can help them. I also think that someone from mental health ought to be part of this maybe as well. So let's.
We'll ask staff to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll ask staff to work with all the appropriate stakeholders and see if there's anyone missing that need to be part of this going forward. I'm mindful of Mr. Spiz's, Commissioner Spiz's comments. We don't want to get it too big because then things can't happen.
Yeah.
I think we can get something going. So with
I
that,
have
we
lots of time, since there's
Got it.
no Big Ten football.
perfect. All right. So Commissioner Todd moves to postpone action on this. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Weipert. All in favor of postponing? I mean, I'll just say the dates, to the next regular meeting, so we'll have something. If not sooner, we'll do that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that we postpone to the next meeting. If not, or we'll take it up sooner at the next board meeting. All right, fantastic. Look at that. Great discussion. I want to thank Ms. Evans and Mr. Yocum for making time, and Mr. Tim, Mr. Hobbs. I know we're going to be talking about school reopening plans, so Mr. Yocum, if you want to stay on a little bit longer.
Sure.
Thank you both for your time. All right,
Thank you.
next item. We have a miscellaneous resolution installing a drop box for campaign finance reports at the Oakland County Elections Division building. For discussion purposes, it will get moved by Commissioner Taub, seconded by Commissioner Spiz. That's Commissioner Taub, why don't you speak to this, like the impetus of why this resolution is before us, and then we can talk about some of the things, the conversation I know that Commissioner Taub and I've had on possibly looking beyond just our own facility, and then Commissioner Gershenson. Commissioner Taub.
Yes, Well, I got a call from someone who was running for office who said, how do I do this? And I said, well, you got to make an appointment. And then I thought, holy cow, even if they're wearing masks, we have hundreds of people who, especially in the primary, you know, where there's unlimited people running, going in to file their reports. We also have people who had to file the reports who weren't running and other people. So my thought was, not only is it wasting time having to make appointments by the staff, but the staff, even if you're wearing masks, you're still exposed. It's another exposure for people working behind a counter. I know there's barriers and so on and so forth, but I think it would be very nice to have that type of a drop box. We have drop boxes for our ballots, and they're stuck in, you know, and they have to be received by 8 o'clock on election day. We all know the drill. Okay. So, you know, 7 o'clock on election day, if you finally make up your mind, although I don't get it because you got it 6 weeks ahead of time, but if that's how you want to roll, that's free country, I guess. So you can drive up and drop it in the box and it'll be counted. So I think the same thing ought to be available. There is a time frame and for that, and we can work the stamping out on that, just as we do with the ballots. And I think it would make it much easier, not only for the person running for office, but for the staff who have to see all these people over the counter and make appointments during the week. And I don't know if everybody got their time in, and then they get fined if they can't get an appointment. So that was my thought. Do that, and perhaps, as Commissioner Woodward said, to expand it to maybe help other communities that do not have a drop box for ballots, to put one up in a very secure place. So that's my thoughts. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We can't hear you.
You're muted. Oh, sorry. There you go. There, sorry. As Commissioner Top said, is one thing. The conversation was for those communities that might not have a drop box or want an additional drop box. There were some funding that was made available for communities to get additional drop boxes if we were going to be adding something. That we maybe should look at this holistically and see like what the costs were, and there's some economies of scale to help drive down costs to be able to make this happen. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, to what Commissioner Taub said, and then Commissioner Gershon, you had your hand up and calling you next. You can make an appointment, but Commissioner Taub, I think it's also important to recognize that people can email their campaign finance reports in. They can mail their campaign reports in. Postage is that's a whole nother conversation these days. The post office. You can fax it in. There are other ways also to get the campaign finance report in. So we should also be figuring out from an efficiency point of view how the clerk's office would utilize this, and we probably need to get the clerk's office to weigh in as well. But Commissioner Gershenson, you had your hand up, and then got Commissioner Nelson, followed by Commissioner Spiz.
I did. I want to thank Commissioner Taub for bringing this topic up. Certainly, when it got close to having to put my report in, I panicked. I thought, well, I'm totally following the restrictions and not interacting with people. My husband and I are both high risk, and I called the elections office, and Amy agreed to meet me outside where I would drop it off and there would be no contact. And Amy wasn't available, so Wendy in the office actually came out and took the document and then sent me the timestamp. So I really think there are lots of ways for electeds and commissioners to return their campaign finance report. We're certainly given a lot of notice about when these are due. And another way is that I was going to make arrangements with our Megan or our staff and drop off it and have it sent through inter-office mail. I think there's a big difference between drop boxes for ballots, which I completely support, and drop boxes for our convenience or a candidate's convenience. I think there are ways where we could do this that wouldn't have any cost, but I certainly couldn't support any action without talking to Lisa Brown, Joe Roselle, and Art Holsworth in facilities. I think these are important opinions that we would need to get before going further. I've also been told by some of my clerks that do have drop boxes that people get confused and they put in lots of other things in the drop boxes. So inadvertently, that could really create a lot more work for our staff. So basically, at this point, I could not support it just because I haven't heard from the clerk. I haven't heard from Joe Roselle, their opinions, and also our facilities director. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Nelson, followed by Commissioner Spiz. Commissioner Nelson.
Commissioner Gershenson had already stated some things I wanted to say, so I'm good. Thank you.
All right, good. Commissioner Spiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was fortunate enough to be able to email mine in, but I also fortunate enough to have a scanner at home that I can do that with my signature on it. Not everybody's going to have that, no matter which position you're running for within the county. So I fully support having a Dropbox. And actually, Marcia brought up a point, which it might be something to have additional conversations with our clerk. There might be other things we should have a Dropbox for. I know there's different things that might be put into that, but sometimes you can't make it to the clerk's office between time X and time Y to get stuff in there. So me, a bigger discussion I'd be open for. But I do support a Dropbox in this case, especially during COVID.
Commissioner Taub.
Thank you. I too had somebody come out from the clerk's office with a mask to take my application. But that's not the best use of time. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of candidates running, many of whom are immune compromised, who are not able to go out, many of whom do not want to go to the post office and stand in line and get it stamped, which is what the clerk's directions say. It has to be postmarked by a certain day when they receive it. A lot of people don't want to do that. As we know, mail has been pretty terrible. It sometimes takes a week to get something 3 blocks away from your house. And that could throw people into being fined and so on and so forth. So I have no problem supporting this now. If I'm kind of surprised that somebody from the clerk's office didn't come to speak on this because it is on our agenda. Could have spoken about it, but they didn't. That's their choice. But I'm going to be supporting this because, again, especially during COVID, this is, I think, the way to go, not only for our county commissioners, but for everybody running for office, regardless of what. It's all local elections, folks. It's cities, townships, villages. We've got a lot of those up this year and more next year. I think we need to be prepared. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Taub. I mean, I think that there are 3 points being brought up that I think are valid. I mean, Commissioner Spiz's point, if there are there things that are appropriate for dropping off. The time stamping, not so much the postmarking, but the time stamping is what's the relevant thing that has to actually happen. There is the idea that there isn't other ways, and if people wrote their campaign finance reports, took pictures of it, texted it over, emailed it off from there, like all of that can be done and never has been pushed away. So I think that there are a variety of ways to be able to do this. What I think that we need to look at, Commissioner Gerson brings up a good point from a facilities point of view. The cost of doing this, I assume that any type of Dropbox would be about the same. One thing I didn't think about, if people are going to start dropping off their tax information in there or other types of stuff that deadline sensitive. I mean, do we make it a ritual to check it every single day, or just like at the time when we expect things? The worst thing might be people dropping off their absentee ballots. In those, in a campaign finance report Dropbox. So I think that there's some questions that we do need to figure out as it relates directly to this. And then I think that there's like this broader question, and I know that it was introduced at meeting last Thursday. I know the election advisory group is a conversation that they're going to have to say, hey, is there anybody out there who else needs a Dropbox? So we don't actually have a budget amendment of what this will cost. So we've got to figure that out as well. I don't imagine it's very expensive. If there's a way to do it and everyone can kind of compromise, I think there's a way forward. If there is objection, then I think then we're kind of stuck. So I guess I'm gonna throw it out to the sponsor. How do you want to handle this?
Well, we have drop boxes all over the county. Many people haven't been out to the county. I happen to drive by our building, just as if the gate's gonna open in that little area, there's a drop box there. I don't know what it's for. I didn't stop to read.
Well, I think that's the point though, right? If we don't know what it's
there.
for.
It's there.
It's there. What is it
It's
for?
here. So facilities has put up drop boxes here, there, and
Oh, I
everywhere.
knew that. That one's actually for the treasurer's office. That's for
Okay,
taxes.
all right. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So whatever
Know
it's
that.
there for, it's there for. But we do have drop boxes, and sometimes sadly you're going to get some dummy sticking something dumb in there. It happens, but it's a quick sort. And I just think if you want to have more discussions, that's fine with me. But I think we have an election coming up in November. I think reports are due soon. The election. I don't know what the schedule is, but I think
Maybe
there's
a couple
some
weeks
soon.
before October. So we won't be able to get this up before the post-primary finance reports are due. If there's a way to get consensus. Commissioner Taub, I would recommend that you reach out to the clerk's office and facilities and try to get a cost estimate. And when you and I talked, I'm trying to still get a sense of how many other clerks would like an additional Dropbox because of the size of their community or they don't have one. Or what have you.
I'll call the Clerks Association and see if they can do some of this work for us.
Well, you don't have to worry about the clerk stuff. I think specifically this piece. There's some, I think, questions out there for what is it going to cost? Should it be a slot in the building that people slide it in, or do we want it curbside so people can drive up and drop it in?
Wait a minute. This is COVID dollars we're talking about. This is something that is needed for the COVID pandemic. Let's be fair about it. We don't need a drop box. If everybody can walk in and just stick it over the counter.
No, well, there's different ways to do a drop box. You can have a door slide, pull build into the building. You can have it off by the curb. You can have it off the sidewalk. You have to get out of your car to go to it. And that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the physical logistic of the thing that we're talking about here. And we have all sorts of those, like drop boxes for absentee ballots, curbside, off the street side, in the building side, etc.
Okay, but before we do all this work, if this is not going to pass and your party, the Democrats, don't want it, I'm not going to go to all this work to figure out a plan and a cost and everything else, all right? Because I would have to bring the fiscal note back to you anyhow. So rather than go through all this work, if it's going to be voted down, forget it. We won't do it. That's how I look at it. Doesn't bother me. I just was thinking about the staff in the clerk's office having to do double duty, answering phones, making appointments, seeing people with who knows what they have. So, but if you don't want it and you have the majority, just vote it down now, because to go ahead and get everything done and all this stuff planned out and then have it voted down again, it's a waste of everybody's time.
All right, Commissioner Taub. 15 years of me preparing and doing work and convening things and putting it on paper for things never to get voted on. That's what we do, and we're deliberating. I feel that it's a little frustrating here. There are clear stakeholders. There's the facilities people. There's the clerk's office. I think we should probably. I didn't arrange to have the Clerk Brown actually come in and speak to this item today. I don't know the cost of it. So usually when we've moved things through here, we've had a cost. There is a minimum amount of work that has to be done. I get the idea that's being cast out here, and I'm not completely opposed to that. But to me, it's the will of the committee.
Well, I will call the clerk's office, and when I get a no, I'll let you know, okay?
Okay. Then what's the will? Should you want to hold on this until the next meeting?
Sure.
Okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay, we will just, moved by Taub, seconded by somebody to Wypert. Postpone to the next meeting. We'll get those questions answered. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. There we go. We'll get some more questions and we'll go from there. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. All right, let's move to item 3. Item 3, just want to get an update and call back Mr. Hobbs, and I believe that we've got someone from the health department on the school reopen plans, on the intersection with the governor's order to have plans submitted and how they work with health departments. I will say one thing up front, and I understand as someone who so badly wants schools to reopen so that I can actually work like at a day-to-day. If you can see it next to me is a giant fort that get built in around my home office here. And it's now encroaching on me. We badly want this. I mean, the characterization by some that say that, well, the health department hasn't been stepping up to work with our schools, and that's why we're going virtual, it's a little frustrating to me because there are lots of consideration. There's a huge amount of complexity into actually running school. And the conversation that I know I've had with some school personnel and school board members and administrators has been like, it's too difficult that without X, Y, and Z, particularly fast, rapid testing and ability to quickly respond to that is if anything, the largest health and safety barrier to this. We want to have this conversation. At the same time, I can also appreciate the frustration if we don't have our plan and what does it look like, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So we wanted to create, we're going to have some time to talk about right now. We've got our Kathy Fordsley, our health director, again, Deputy Executive Rudy Hobbs, and I don't know if Mr. Yoakum is still on, just to talk about what Oakland County Health Department's been doing, working with our individual districts, and all the things, all the information that's out there, because I think that there is maybe some information's crossing each other, and we want to be all on the same page. So, Rudy, do you want to start off, and then Kathy, and
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. This has been one of those areas, I always say that probably the hardest thing that, that we have had to really deal with, during this pandemic is really kind of, really working with the schools as it relates that the schools are not, they're the hardest ones to kind of, to think about how to reopen. We kind of went through testing and how we do our drive-through testing, how do we get out to the communities and, do testing in communities of color. We've done a lot around this pandemic to do some outreach, but I tell you, I do not envy the superintendent in their position right now in terms of to how to return to schools. But with that said, we did over the summer, we took Leanne Stafford, who is our health officer. We also had April Lynch, who's the other deputy county executive over operations. And they worked with a small group of superintendents, a couple folks from Superintendent Wanda Cook Robinson staff. I'm not sure, Mike, if you were on that small committee or not. But I know Dandridge was on that committee, who is the HR person for ISD. I know we had a couple superintendents, and and they worked throughout May and as a small team, and we came up with some protocols that we thought that would be relevant in terms of reopening schools. And shortly after that, I know that the governor came out with her roadmap and was very specific in terms of school districts basically paying attention to the phases that their region is in, because everybody is not in the same phase. We know that the UP in northern Michigan is very different from Metro Detroit in the phases and the challenges that that we face versus them. And then also working with the local health department. I'll be very honest in this conversation. I wish that our protocols and school reopening kit would have reached superintendents 3 weeks ago. I'll be very honest in saying that. But that toolkit did reach superintendents last Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And the other thing that I've learned through this too and had to really adjust is that, our health department is literally leading during this pandemic. I mean, there's so many different fights on so many different fronts as it relates to this pandemic, that I felt it was necessary to, to kind of help Kathy, Leanne, and Dr. Faust, who have been doing a, yeoman's job in terms of, kind of putting forth the leadership that we all know we need in Oakland County to handle this pandemic. I kind of took the schools out of their, out of their portfolio, and I handed it over to a young lady named Calandra Anderson. Calandra is now going to be running point and has been running point for the county for like the last, I want to say 2.5, 3 weeks at this point. When Calandra first came on board, I sent Calandra's information over to Wanda Cook Robinson, and I asked her to share that with every superintendent and use Calandra as the point of contact for the health department. Calandra, I believe, is on a phone. I would want Calandra to kind of talk a little bit about, how she thinks that, we can move forward with the schools at this point, because even though these schools are kind of coming back online, at some point we're going to have to make a decision about, how schools actually reopen for in-person instruction. And so, Calandra, if you're online, I think you are. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Rudy.
Awesome. So can I turn it over to you and kind of talk
sure.
about how you think we go forward here?
Absolutely. So thank you, Rudy. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak here at your meeting. As Rudy stated, I came on board with this probably about a month and a half ago, and with the understanding what Rudy has just explained, we came out with some initial guidelines in June, working with a small group of superintendents, and then the governor's roadmap came out, which prescribed a few things for the local health department to provide requirements in collaboration with the schools. And at that time, we started to develop our toolkit, also taking into consideration what other counties were doing and the toolkits that were being put together by other counties to work, try to standardize our process. And we have put together what I feel comfortable with, a comprehensive toolkit that speaks directly to those requirements identified in the roadmap, which specifically talks about screening students and staff, testing protocols, and responding to positive cases. And so our guidelines is not a repeat of what is already outlined in the roadmap in terms of recommendations, but our guidelines are specific to the requirements that the governor has laid out in the roadmap. So we put that together, and we put that out last week with superintendents of schools. And we have opened up the opportunity to have conversation with multiple superintendents. I know I have talked to many public and private and charter superintendents, as well as principals at schools, answering really questions. And if I'm being completely honest, I think that everything that they're looking for is in the toolkit, but understanding the work that goes behind the scenes that is happening at the departmental level here in communicable diseases is not easily identifiable. Every case with COVID is different. There are some things that are pretty standard, but there are also things that we need to pull back and take considerations. We have 3 different types of tests that are being offered. And so not to get schools to overreact, overexpose information with parents and staff, we are really taking the ownership of working with the schools to identify when those cases are positive, what type of things need to happen, what type of tests was done. It's a gray area. We are still learning a lot about COVID, and we're learning every day. The CDC recommendations are not the same as they were in March, including symptoms of the virus. And so our action items that we need to ensure are changing rapidly through CDC guidelines. What we did provide to the schools in our toolkit is not only those 3 required areas, screening of staff and students, testing protocols, responding to positive cases, but we also put together a really nice FAQ that has multiple scenarios that both parents and school officials are going to be faced with. We've included fillable documents and links online where if a student tests positive or if there's a concern, documents are all in one nice little spot for schools to be able to link to. In conjunction with that, we have been meeting with our district nurses for Oakland schools and working with them to find out the feedback, the needs outside of COVID, and how we can continue to educate our students and parents in schools. We right now have hired 63 nurses within our community that have backgrounds in acute care, intensive care, trauma care, long-term care, and we're pulling all those resources together to work closely with the district nurses to support them in their ongoing efforts to continually to educate and teach and provide guidance as recommended by state and through their association. Our plan moving forward is to open up the opportunity for superintendents to go through this toolkit. I have found that speaking directly with superintendents, going through this toolkit, explaining our process has helped tremendously with the understanding. It's really hard when you can't see the work that is going on behind the scenes to understand the process. And again, this information is only as good as today. The CDC may change things tomorrow and we will need to change course. So I feel really good about it. I welcome that opportunity to talk to anyone who's interested in going through this toolkit to help shape the perception of what the response is from the local health department, and also to employ these nurses to reach out to superintendents as early as this week to let them know that we're here to partner with them as well and what we'll be providing to them.
Thank you very much, Calandra, for your work on this. I see we also got Kathy Forsley here. I don't know if there's anything to add. I see you there, but I want to make sure. Is there anything to add to what's been presented? But I know that you got me oversee this amazing health department doing all sorts of things.
So Calandra did a really great job with that overview. And the only thing I would add is, as Rudy also mentioned, is the kind of work that's going on behind the scenes while the good work that Calandra spearheading is going on are things like things that change daily with testing. We have some tremendous contracts, but it's not going to, we're working on more contracts to be able to address the needs as schools open up. And so when that caller or that online person said they were frustrated that sites would be determined, it's because it's really ongoing work. It should be ready fairly soon, but things are changing every day in the state of Michigan in terms of what is testing and what does it look like? What do we need to be thinking about? And we're finding out we're not actually getting all the testing results that we need to in a timely fashion, which isn't news to anyone. So we're trying to really step it up in our community so we can be very, very nimble in terms of getting a result and responding to it immediately and working with the schools. And the other thing is that I think that there's a bit of frustration that we can't exactly say what's going to happen when an individual gets sick in a school or a business or wherever it is. It really is going to be the result of good, strong case investigation where we are able to determine what next steps are. So we are responding to positive results immediately, doing that good in case investigation, and then providing guidance. I think schools have been very worried. There's some language in the Open Up plan from the state of Michigan that makes it sound like the school is responsible for doing case investigation and even contact tracing. And nothing could be further than the truth. Nothing is changing with COVID, just as we do for all vaccine preventable diseases. We respond and we work side by side with the schools to determine what the next steps are going to be and how we're going to react to that case so transmission doesn't continue. So as Calandra says, those one-on-one conversations I think are very useful, or talking to all the superintendents together to answer those questions. No two districts are exactly alike. They do have some similarities, but they also have some differences. So it's really important to have that ongoing communication, and we certainly welcome that.
Thank you, Kathy. And I see Mr. Yoakum still with us. And so I guess I'd like to open from Oakland Schools' perspective. We don't have all 28 school districts on board in the respective charters, but from your vantage point, the collaboration, if there are parts, if there's gaps, let's fill those gaps. But I know that you and your team and Oakland County has been working hand in hand from the very beginning here. Can you shed any insight into kind of where schools are? And I know each school district is in maybe a little bit different place, but from your vantage point, is there support that's needed that's not there yet, or that we can tighten up, etc.?
Our role at this point with the preparedness and response plans under Executive Order 142 is different than our role under the continuity of learning plans when the governor first closed schools and ordered each district to create the continuity of learning plan. In the spring, we approved local district plans, and then we sent them on to the state. Under Executive Order 142, we simply receive the plans. Those are approved by the local Board of Education, as it should be. We receive them, and then we send them up to the state. It's been a summer in which things are really constantly shifting. I just want to say up front that I deeply appreciate all the support that our districts and Oakland Schools have received from the county and from the county health department. First off, the 63 nurses who will make a significant difference in helping districts as they reopen this fall. In addition to that, we've had a very strong partnership with a nurse from the health department embedded in our staff at Oakland Schools, becoming a very strong liaison between the health department and public education, communicating with our local districts. In fact, she has a question and answer session with what we call our Teaching and Learning Council from across the county, coming up in a day or so. The Teaching and Learning Council are all the chief academic officers in the county. So she'll be able to answer questions and help people understand that toolkit that was distributed last week. So we appreciate all of that support. The health department was with us hand in glove as we worked with that superintendent's committee under the Oakland County Superintendent's Association, and began developing protocols very early on, even prior to the release of the governor's roadmap, to begin to give support to districts to think about how they would approach the reopening. And that became even more pronounced once the roadmap came out. We knew specifically what the governor was requiring. So we feel we've received strong support. It's a very, very difficult situation because districts are facing a situation in which a very large proportion of their families are not going to be happy if we're not in person. They're also going to be, we also have a large contingent of families where if we're completely 100% virtual, they're not going to be happy with that situation. So their superintendents are caught in this situation where they're really trying to weigh that carefully. And I think every one of them, every district is absolutely putting safety and health of students first and foremost, as well as the community, because of transmission into the community, as well as the families that they serve. So they're really trying to weigh that out. At this point, we have only received 2 plans. We received the plan from West Bloomfield, and we received a plan from Ferndale. So we think there'll be quite a few plans coming in this week. They are due to the state by the end of the business day on Monday, August 17th. So there'll be a big rush of plans this week. Right now, as you may have heard in the press, West Bloomfield is online at the high school level with a hybrid plan in place for K-8, and then Ferndale is going to be virtual.
Thank you, Mr. Yocum. Let me open up to any questions that commissioners have, clarification on what's going on. I think many of you have also gotten feedback, or been approached by some of our school board members, school personnel, and everything. I think I want to thank everyone who's part of this conversation to help get us clarity on this. Commissioner Gershenson.
Yes, thank you to everybody that's working so hard on this. This is such an emotional issue, and in my district, there's been some school districts that have announced a plan and then they've changed their plan. So there's tremendous uncertainty of so many parents out there. But I wanted to go back to something that was said, and I don't know if it would be Calandra that would answer this. It's been mentioned a couple times that the language from the state is unclear. Have we corrected that language or explained that language in our packet?
Hi, this is Calandra. I'm not sure which language specifically you're referring to, but I feel that the toolkit that we've put together is very, very clear, very easily readable, and it provides those guidelines that schools are looking for. But in terms of what the governor put out, I'm not sure what's not clear in there.
Okay.
What you're referring to exactly.
I thought the speaker, the person who called in on public comment from Troy mentioned it, and I thought, Kathy, did you mention there was some confusion about some language?
But Commissioner Gershenson, I think that the speaker was referring to collaboration versus coordination and seeing if there was a misunderstanding. And I think just based on what you're hearing, the conversations, I don't think there's a misunderstanding. There's guidelines, there's a toolkit. This is how we do it. So what I have heard, and I'm sorry, Kathy, if you want to jump in, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I have heard in superintendent presentations or school board presentations that we're going virtual because we don't know how to run these schools safely without being virtual. And even though I can appreciate that, it's more complex than that. It is how do you put 500 students in a school building and not have ability to get test results in case someone is potentially symptomatic or potentially been exposed in less than 24, 36, 48 hours. If you can't do that, if it's going to take you 5 days because our labs are all backed up, what do you do in that situation? Do you keep that student quarantined? Do you quarantine every person who had exposure over that period of time? Do you shut the school down for 2 weeks every time there's a potential risk? Those to me are and I'm deferring to the scientists here. Those are the physical obstacles of putting hundreds of people in a school building every single day. And that's just, until we get the rapid testing, and my fingers are crossed that Beaumont can get their approval. They've got 45-minute testing that's going through the FDA approval process right now. And there's other things that are out there. But until we can have that, and this is just me, just listening to the science, that to me is an easy marker. Like until we can get that testing speed up to a level it needs to be, putting that many people in a building is maybe not the best idea. But Kathy, I promise not to editorialize anymore. But I feel I had to say that.
I just wanted to clarify when I said there are some things in the Open Up plan that might have been confusing. And when I was referring to contact tracing, there are 2 paragraphs back to back that I think have confused our superintendents in terms of one says that schools must collect contact information for any close contacts of affected individuals. That's the work of a health department, not of a school. We will work with the school to try to get information in terms of contact number or name of a parent kind of thing. But it's the work of a health department that will determine what is a close contact. And I have to say, the definition of close contact has changed a number of times. We certainly would not expect our schools to keep abreast of that. That's something that our communicable disease unit does on a daily basis. We just got new guidance over the weekend, and some of that verbiage is in there. That's the kind of thing we are always going to have our finger on and apply it when the case comes up. So we wanted to be very clear in the toolkit that this is not a burden that the schools need to bear. This is something that we are taking on and are prepared to do so. But we will need some assistance from them in terms of maybe getting phone numbers and addresses and things like that. But they do not need to do any of that kind of work. And I'm hoping they find that to be a great relief to them.
And I'll just add, Kathy, that with the summer athletic programs and kids being in camp and things like that, we have gotten tremendous support from superintendents. When there has been questions, they've contacted us directly. We've been able to quickly intervene and answer those questions. Of course, this is not, this is a very small volume, but I think that they have been very open to reaching out to our communicable disease department, getting the support that they need, and having us go a little bit further and reaching out to parents and asking questions as well. I think that their ability to quickly distribute information to their communities has been a good success for parents and students as well. So, I mean, even behind the scenes, the little bit of things that we've done so far in our communication plan and explaining and supporting them through some of the issues that they experience with their athletic programs, band programs, and the such has worked really well.
Thank you. I've got Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd first like to say I appreciate the toolkit. It has to be very difficult to pull something like this together, and I appreciate having this. With that being said, I just have a few quick questions. On page 11, under the responding to the illness in regards to the requirements, one of the requirements that is stated is that school staff must wear N95 masks when working with individuals who have special needs. Who's going to be providing the school districts for these N95 masks? And then furthermore, it also sounds like students are required to wear cloth masks, but upon the responding with showing symptoms, I'm assuming that students are then to transfer from a cloth mask to a surgical mask. Who is going to be providing the surgical masks for the students and the N95 masks for the staff?
I think the county stands ready to be assistance if needed.
So do schools already have those N95 masks and surgical masks on hand? If
I'm not aware. I have not, a school district hasn't contacted us saying we need this, but I think that, that conversation will happen. We will make sure, just as though, we've made sure that, we have covered all the needs in Oakland County. We will make sure that schools have exactly what they need to start up, including, N95 masks, if need be.
Thank you, Deputy Hobbs. who is the contact person? So if somebody contacts us as commissioners and inquires about these N95 masks and surgical masks, can you provide contact name and information so we could share that information?
Sure. I will say this, two things. One, I think Calandra shared very early on that she's going to be meeting with district nurses on a weekly basis. Two, by having our 63 nurses dispersed throughout the county, I think that we'll be in those 63 nurses working with, school leadership. I think that's also another avenue for us to be able to understand what the needs are And then I anticipate that, that myself and Calandra will be meeting with superintendents on a weekly basis. So I think, between those 3 points of contact, we'll have an understanding, but Tom Hardesty remains the point of contact for all PPE for the county.
Okay, thank you.
And we are stockpiling a lot of that to be able to deploy. I mean, I think, to Commissioner Nelson's point, if a school district goes all virtual, the need for that in the short term is obviously less. If you are a hybrid model, it's different. If you're all in, that's different too. So, but getting those numbers and figuring out how to get those numbers so that we are aware that I know that as a board that we want to make sure our kids are safe, that whatever resources that we need to bring to bear to help make sure that people have their equipment.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's essential to be proactive. I get that we can't, send out cases of N95 masks, but I also think it's important that we are proactive in case schools are opening and they do have those cases. So I appreciate that information. Just last question. If we are contacted by school personnel or school board members in regards to needing clarification or additional information on the toolkit, who do we direct them to?
Calandra Anderson is running point.
Thank you.
Can you, Deputy Executive Hobbs, can you make certain that we all have Calandra's contact information?
Will do. I'll send it around today.
That'd be great. So we can spread that around. And to that point, to Commissioner Nelson's point about making sure that people are aware of the toolkit, I think the toolkit was probably sent out to school superintendents. I wonder if it's been sent out to school board members, because I've been contacted by more school board members that probably never got the toolkit. And I think it is on the website, but if it might not be a bad idea, I would like to see, and I'm happy to ask our staff to help support making sure that toolkit is sent to every school board member, like a hard copy in the mail, which might arrive next month. But I mean, something so that they have this document, so that we're all operating from the same information. I think it's really, really critically important. I've got Commissioner Taub followed by Commissioner Lubes. Commissioner Taub.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Nelson was reading from a document. Would you please tell me, Mr. Chair, what document that was?
Commissioner Taub, it was the email that Mr. Chairman had sent out to us earlier today.
It was what?
I forwarded it. It was an email that I forwarded along that Commissioner Hobbs had prepared over the weekend. That's the reference to the toolkit. It's the reopen toolkit that she was referencing. So I forwarded to all commissioners so that you all had that information.
I'm sorry, sir, but I did not get it.
I know you got it. I know I sent it to you.
Okay.
But I will make sure it gets forwarded again. I promise I will forward it again while we're on this meeting when Commissioner Lubes has her comments.
I think, Mr. Chair, our email is now slow like the regular mail. That's my take on it. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Lubes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had two questions. Commissioner Nelson asked one, which was the contact information for Calandra, because again, you are correct. Individual school board members have been contacting us for more information. So having Calandra's information will be helpful. My second question was, do the health department workers receive hazard pay while in the schools working? And not just the nurses, it would be any other technical staff or hearing staff, etc.
Not that I know of. No, I think we had ended hazard pay at the county several weeks ago.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lubes. Any further question? Commissioner Taub, I just forwarded that email again. So check to see if you get it. Any further questions on the school reopen plans, our health department's response? Calandra is our point person. And we got Commissioner Whiteford, followed by Commissioner Taub. Commissioner Whiteford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have the protocols and the toolkit and all that and the guidance, but the governor's also ordered everybody to have a backup virtual plan too, right? I mean, our goal is to get the kids back in school as fast and as safe as possible. But everybody has to have that backup plan too, right? That's within the whole thing.
Definitely. I get to that point. I mean, I think there's also uncertainty. I mean, I think when we see cases creeping up, people feeling that we don't have to maintain the precautions, and we see hot spots. Our health department, we get the alerts when we see little hot spots around in Oakland County. I mean, every time that stuff happens, we run the risk of sliding backwards and moving into the next positive phase. And so being prepared for moving to a lower phase and requiring virtual for everybody. I mean, our school districts are, and I don't envy the situation that they're in by any means. I mean, this is I think as described, you have superintendents that, as Mr. Open talked about, you've got a large group of parents that want to be in person now, guaranteed, because I don't know what, for a variety of reasons, you got a bunch of people who's like, there's under no circumstances am I going to feel comfortable going in person, and superintendents and school boards and staff and everyone's trying to figure out how to reconcile that with the objective of being able to deliver education services in a safe way, at least until we get a vaccine. And so it is a impossible position that people are put in, but I mean, you have to have that backup plan for sure. Commissioner Taub, Commissioner Taub and Commissioner Gershenson, and we'll wrap it up. Commissioner Taub.
That's okay. I do not have it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you don't have the email? Okay, I will forward it to another email. Okay.
I forwarded it to you. Shall we check again?
Commissioner Spiz forwarded it to you too. Commissioner Gershenson. Oh, Commissioner Jackson, then Commissioner Gershenson.
No, I think Commissioner Gershenson was first.
But I think she already spoke. But Commissioner Gershenson, then Commissioner Jackson. Yes, Commissioner Gershenson, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just wanted to thank Deputy Hobbs and Kathy Forsley and Mr. Yoke and Calandra, because it's now really starting to perk in all of our districts, and we're getting lots of calls. So the fact we have some contact information now is great. And just being reminded about the fluidity of everything as well. So just want to commend the team for convening this meeting and bringing us all up to date.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to also thank Rudy and Calandra and Kathy Forsey and our health department for providing such a comprehensive document and also giving us a point person, because sometimes we have to kind of like depend upon ourselves to figure out who to contact about what. So thank you for that. I just want to ask about positive tests. Are we going to require students and their families or students to do contact tracing?
Kathy?
No, I mean,
no.
I think, can you reframe your question? I'm sorry.
Well, I asked if a student has a positive test, are we going to require them to undergo contact tracing? Because that's a big concern about young people being carriers.
Yeah, so what happens as soon as we get a positive or it's reported to us, we will definitely reach out and do case investigation. As soon as that's completed, contact tracing begins. So yes, every positive, all their contacts that are identified through case investigation will have someone assigned to them, and they will call them every day for 14 days since the date of last exposure to the positive case.
Wow, thank you.
And that is, I think it's important to, for those who are tuning in just for this one, it didn't sit through the in-depth contact tracing session that we had with Kathy a while back. We've got over 200 people that are trained and ready to go. The best trained, the most trained than any county department in the entire state. And I think what Kathy underscored, which is important, it's not school district's responsibility to do the contact tracing. That is a public health department responsibility. And we are not, we are doing it. We are staffed up to do it and prepared to spend whatever resources necessary to do it. So I think that's really good point to remind the public school districts that we've got that. So last point, Commissioner Taub, and then we'll end the conversation on this. Commissioner Taub.
Yes, Kathy, with the contact tracing, I have some concerns because we've had some false positives. Do you retrace, do you test people if they're, and there's been some in the news as well. People tested positive, their families all were contact traced and everybody was contacted, and 3 days later it was negative. What are we doing about that accuracy?
So there's a lot of things at play here. We always will find out what kind of test was performed. Some tests are not well validated, and so they would be considered probables. But we still treat probables, especially if there are symptoms that coincide with the positive test, or if there is, if it can be epileak, meaning that person has had exposure to a known case and it's positive, that is very strong evidence of a case. Now, on the other side, if it's negative and there's symptoms, we don't necessarily always, or if there's a known exposure and there's symptoms, we may request another test be done. And we would ask them to remain at home and in quarantine until we've had a confirmation. So that can happen too. But we seem to be able to work through these cases and be able to get this additional information that strongly supports a positive. But in some cases, what we're hearing about is actually an unvalid test being a false positive. But if we can confirm it with a validated test, that would be great. So some tests we might be a little more suspicious of, can I say? But I think we're working through those issues. The state is really trying to work with us on those issues. But these are the things that have been going on in the last several weeks or months, even months actually, that we've been working so hard at, so that by the time we get to school, I hope we're in a very solid place in terms of being able to feel like we can rely on the testing we're receiving. But we will work closely with every family that has a positive to help them be confident in that result.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, thank you, everyone, again. To Deputy Executive Hobbs, Kathleen Forsley, Calandra, Mr. Yoakum, for staying on. This is a really important information, and we've got some now messengers that can help spread the correct information. And I'll be working with Commissioner Hobbs and working with maybe our staff as well to make certain that school board members also have those toolkits so that they can be appropriately informed about what's the guidelines going forward and continue to be responsive to what our local school districts and local schools need going forward. So thank you, everyone. Okay, I'll move us into item 4. And this one I envision to be a briefer conversation, but just given the timeliness, and some of you might have saw some news reports following the primary election in which the leadership of our Oakland County Elections Division, Mr. Joe Roselle, and his team, the success that they had running their first election during a pandemic. So not only survive, but the resources that we made available to support our elections team and to administer elections safely. I asked Mr. Roselle to see if he could come give a brief update, a report on success, the things that we did, and the success and the results of that effort, and maybe as a prelude of what's on the horizon and maybe what's more needed to be equally successful in November. So without any further ado, Mr. Roselle.
Thank you, Chairman Woodward. I'm I'll just kind of cover sort of some of the things that we've done and how things went in August and where we see November going, as you've outlined. One of the first things, as the board is well aware, there was a democracy initiatives initiated by the board chair and the board, and that really partnered our office with the local clerks, with stakeholders from the disability community and various other outside groups to sort of put our heads together and come up with, all right, how are we going to run this election in a pandemic? Are we thinking of everything? And what are some of the resources that our office needs? And what are some of the resources that our local clerks need as we partner through this process? And it was a very successful endeavor, the Democracy Initiative and the committee. And so I'll just talk briefly about some of the things that we did. One of the first things that we sort of talked about was a public information initiative, and that involved these papers here with the sticker and the full page ad inside the paper, along with a postcard that we mailed out to every voter who received an absentee ballot, letting them know how the open primary works, since we saw a significant number of new first-time voters now engaged in this process, and the importance of not splitting or mixing your ticket in the open primary. So there was this whole public information initiative about how to return your ballot, not to split your ticket, and just timeliness of returning your ballot, etc. We felt that that was very successful. The second thing we talked about was resources and things that our office would need to administer the largest ever absent voter counting board in this state, as long as we've been a state. There's never been an AV counting board larger than the one that our office administered, larger than any one that the city of Detroit has ever had, et cetera. And so the board approved, as you are aware, roughly $1.2 million worth of funds to purchase new equipment, which included high-speed ballot processors, high-speed envelope openers. It allowed us to pay a $50 premium to the AV workers who would be working for us, and that definitely helped in our recruiting of folks to fill these critical spots, both working for us and working in the local community. So that was a big success story as well that the committee worked on and sort of devised a plan. So I'll just talk a little bit about the AV Counting Board experience itself and some of the other things that we did. The first thing that we did was training, and we provided every election inspector in this county, as promised to the board, the opportunity to train online. So they didn't have to come see me and be in a conference room or a conference center with other people if they were concerned about exposure. We quickly threw together an online training medium. We partnered with IT and had their multimedia folks come out to film some video segments where we felt it would be beneficial. Mixed in, we developed an exam the inspector would have to end, so we knew that they were actually paying attention, taking the online training, passing the exam. So we did that, and that was very successful. We managed thousands of people coming into the system, getting them registered, and getting the training put out to them to be able to be prepared to work in the polling place. We also added a sort of coronavirus segment to this about how to protect themselves, PPE that was available, and sort of what to expect in the polling place. We got a lot of positive feedback from our local clerks, as well as positive feedback from the inspectors who participated in the online training opportunity. As far as the county's absent voter counting board, we hired 150 inspectors and broke the AV board up into 4 pods, if you will. So the conference center at Oakland Schools, they hosted us having this absent voter counting board. The conference center for protection was divided into 4 rooms to keep people distance, et cetera. And we processed over 50,000 ballots. We started the day at 7 o'clock, which is the soonest by law that we can start. And by 3 p.m. in the afternoon, we were done. We shattered any record that's ever existed in the state. In fact, I had to beg Oakland schools to turn on the television so that the inspectors could watch TV for 5 hours because they were about to be bored out of my mind. Fortunately, we found a Murder, She Wrote, Matlock, which they seem to really love those programs. So we put on, I even took a picture of it. I thought nobody will believe that these inspectors are watching TV at 3 o'clock. They're done with the processing of ballots. So those results were put online at 8:02. So we provided a safe environment for these folks. We set a record for processing. Our local clerk partners were great with facilitating either pickup or delivery of those ballots. It was a really, really positive experience. We picked up all kinds of positive press over it as far as the west side of the state and nationally as a model that other counties should follow for how they process absentee ballots and how this process can be done efficiently and accurately and safely in a pandemic. So we were very, very proud of that. We made available to local clerks through the county executive's office reopen kits. So they were able to go to the old Children's House of Bedrooms, I believe, and pick up reopening kits, which included thermometers and social distancing signs for their precincts. Our office also distributed PPE, sorting and distributing PPE that came from the state to our local clerks. It was a lot of work. I'm not going to undersell it. It was a lot of work. I mean, 7-day weeks, 10 to 12-hour days for a long time. But it all came together. I was a little nervous initially with recruitment of poll workers, but everything turned out great. We hired more than we needed because we knew there would be cancellations and folks would drop out, but we were at the magic number come election morning, so that seemed to work out well. So Oakland County is really shining right now as a result of how successful both the county was in its administration of the absent voter counting board, and then how our local clerks did out in the precincts, managing that whole process and providing a safe voter experience. Other counties were negatively, Genesee, Wayne, some other counties were put in a negative light nationally for how things went in their county. Our county was highlighted in a very positive light nationally. So now as we look ahead to November, we've already had communities who did not partner with us in August say, yeah, we definitely want to partner with you in November. So we're gonna look at that. We are gonna continue to recruit election workers. The participation was overwhelming from the folks who were working for us. We received a lot of positive emails afterward, and they want to come back and work, so that's great. But we need to build on that if we're going to be taking on additional communities in November. So we have a definite need to continue with recruitment. And then I'm in the process of working with both the postal system and our vendor on the prepaid postage envelopes for November. I have some concerns about the postal system, as you all were discussing earlier. This is not new to anyone. And my concern is if we do this a particular way with business reply and the postage is paid via business reply, I need assurances from the post office that it's some type of automated business reply. These ballots cannot be slowed down at any point in the process for any manual tallying like is done with some business reply mail. So I'm in the process of trying to work out the finite details of how this will work. And if plan A doesn't work, what will our plan B be to get the postage on these envelopes? So all of that's being worked out right now. We're in the process of certifying the August primary right now. Those of you that are precinct delegates, that'll be certified by the end of the day today by our office. So you'll receive a notice in the mail, hopefully in a few days from our office for precinct delegates. Certification will be done closer to August 18th. I envision this taking the full 2 weeks, and then we'll have a period for recounts, et cetera. So all in all, I'm very happy. We had some communities that were late reporting. Some of those communities have reached out about partnering with us in November. Some communities took over 24 hours to count their absentee ballots. So they struggled. And so we're going to work to figure out what they need if they're going to maintain processing them locally, or if they're interested in partnering with us in November. So that's, I know you've had a long meeting, and I don't want to continue, unless you have questions. I'll kind of wrap up my comments there and take any questions.
Well, thank you, Joe, the entire elections division. You guys did an incredible job. I want to reiterate, you demonstrated what you were able to do, and the team and everyone who was part of it built a model that worked. And it's probably even more important as we look going forward. I know you and I had a short conversation with the anticipation of doubling, or in some cases tripling, the amount of absentee ballots. If it took 24 hours for one community, it might take 2 or 3 days unless we incorporate this partnership model, which has been proven to work. And for those who are watching, we did not go out and recruit workers so they could sit around and watch Murder, She Wrote and Matlock and other things. They are required by law to be sequestered until 8 p.m. because they physically saw the ballots and know the counts and the results. And so they can't leave. That's why they're stuck. And usually it takes you right up to 8 p.m. or longer. And to be done by 3 o'clock shows that we have capacity and it's scalable to be able to help support people. So I want to say again, thank you. Incredible job. And looking forward to even greater success stories going forward. I've got Commissioner Zach, who had her hand up with a question. Commissioner Zach. And then Commissioner Taub.
First of all, I want to thank you, Joe, and your team. I do know some workers and had wonderful feedback. You know, the quality people volunteer. They came to work because they wanted to do their civic duty during COVID, and it was wonderful. Joe, what other resources do you need, for the November election? Do we need more high-speed counting machines? Do you have any sense of what we might need?
I'm in the
I'm
process.
going to jump in first. I mean, the first time that Joe told me what he needed, then he told me the second time, and then we broke 1 million. It keeps growing. Joe, now, please, by all means.
I'm just asking. I'm the finance chair. What do we need?
Right. I'm in the process now of reviewing that and assessing sort of with projections what equipment we have, and we may need to look at a different facility other than Oakland Schools if capacity reaches a certain point. So I think it's fair to say I will be back to you, if the needs warrant it, and I will have broken down the situation. It's going to depend on, do all of the communities that asked us originally for November want to sign on, and then our communities that didn't originally approach us about November that now want to sign on, is that going to tip the scales in terms of capacity? So I'm reviewing and studying that now. I'll be in communication with our local clerks once this election is certified, about that, and then we'll come back to you if resources are needed.
One of the things that folks read the Free Press story today that kind of talked about that there is a huge concern that if other counties follow our suit, from the supply chain, fortunately we got a $1.2 million worth of equipment, so we are leaps and bounds ahead if we need more equipment. I think to Commissioner Zach's point, I think this board is very willing and eager to help support and secure those resources so that we can run this. Commissioner Zach, do you have any additional? Okay. Commissioner Taub. Oh, you're muted, Commissioner Taub.
Sorry. I have a couple questions. Do our locals have high-speed counters and envelope openers?
Some do, yes. The largest of those communities have invested in that, yes.
Do you know which ones?
Just Commissioner Taub, to that point, we also made the local government partnership funds eligible to be used if a local community wanted to buy their own equipment to be able to manage that. So that was something that they could have applied for in a grant to fund that. I know I saw some come through some of the grants that we've already approved for them.
Okay. Do you know which ones offhand, Joe?
It's the largest: Troy, Farmington Hills, Southfield, Bloomfield Township, Independence Township, Waterford. It's a lot of our large-sized communities that have them, or have Rochester Hills They either own one high speed or multiple high speeds.
Okay, thank you. I want to commend you on keeping everybody safe, especially the absentee voter, people who came in, bless their hearts, to help you out locally. Speaking of keeping people safe, I know you have great concerns about your staff as well. And I know you did the best you could. And hopefully we didn't have any outbreaks from people who worked or staff people. So that's a good thing. But I'm also thinking about drop boxes, and I was asked to ask you. So I thought that drop boxes for campaign finance reports, maybe not after the pandemic is over, we hope, but during the pandemic would be something we could look into. And I was told to call you and ask you what you thought about it. Well, I got you right here. So what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, one of the initial things that pops into my mind is a concern for the safety of my staff, and that is that all of our mail that comes into this building is screened at materials management and reviewed for whether it's a bomb or anthrax. And I certainly would not want my staff to be expected to go out and empty a drop box and bring something into this office or into the courthouse that's an explosive device or chemical. So I think this is something that, that's just one example that immediately came to mind. The second one is, the drop box for the treasurer's office is extremely inconvenient. You have to pull into an area, you're then blocking other people from getting to the gate, then have to back out into oncoming traffic. And I just think that if we're going to do it, I have safety concerns, I have convenience concerns. I'd want to talk to facilities about it to see if it's even feasible, and then who's going to empty the drop box. I don't want to get the campaign finance reports are already an issue of contention where I filed it on time. No, I didn't. We'll be in some litigation at some point with a candidate and for local office over whether reports were filed or not. I just don't want to go down this road where I put it in the Dropbox at 4:59. You need to consider it timely, and then because we're not time stamping it. So it's just something that I want to think about and make sure that we've covered all the possible concerns before I said, yeah, let's do it. Because we do have other avenues that folks can return the reports. So I just want to make sure if we're going to provide this, that it's safe for my employees, that it's accessible to the public and not put in a place like the treasurer's Dropbox where it's extremely difficult to get to and then get out of, frankly, because you're in a one-way lane. And then, what are there legal concerns or something about the timeliness of when it would be put in the Dropbox?
Okay.
All right, we get time to work on that. This item is about the election results, so we'll come back to that conversation later. More Dropbox to be had. Any more questions about the election results and what Oakland County's been doing and what we're doing going forward? We good?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Seeing none. Okay, I think that's the last item on our agenda, so I will declare the committee adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I mean, it's like